This happened when I was a kid. At the time, I was probably about 12 years old. I remember that occasionally we would go to Carl's Jr. because there were several in the area. I was with my mom, and I think we were shopping or something during the day. On the way home, we were picking up food for us as well as my brother and dad who were at home. When we got to Carl's Jr., my mom parked in the parking lot and asked if I wanted to come inside with her. I told her that I just wanted the California burger meal and I would wait. I didn't feel like going in and standing in line with her and would rather wait out in the car. My mom left and went inside. As I sat there, I just sort of looked around the parking lot. I watched a couple of people go in and out of the restaurant. It had just gotten dark outside, and there were maybe 7 or 8 other cars in the parking lot if I had to guess. A couple of minutes after my mom went in, I saw a man walk out of the Carl's Jr. The guy started walking over towards me. My mom's car was a white SUV, and we were parked on the back side of the parking lot, not right up against the building. There wasn't a car next to us, so I was a little bit confused when the guy seemed to be headed straight for me. I honestly didn't think he would reach my mom's car. I thought he would turn and go to his car, whatever one that was, but he didn't. Eventually, he reached me. He didn't go to the window or try to open the door though. Instead, he just kind of paced around at the back side of the car where I couldn't really see him. He was kind of in the blind spot, and I had no clue as to what he was doing. I just remember that he was wearing a reddish colored jacket and a baseball cap. I also remember he had sort of a beard. He seemed to go around the back of the car to the other side. I was getting uncomfortable and was hoping that my mom would come back out soon. I looked back to the door of the Carl's Jr., hoping to see my mom, but she wasn't coming out yet. In fact, the parking lot all around was pretty quiet at that moment. Suddenly, I heard the back passenger side door open up. I was seated in the front passenger seat, and it really caught me off guard. I guess I had forgotten to lock the car doors. Without thinking, I jumped over the center console to the driver's seat of the car and went for the door. I'm not sure why exactly I didn't go out my door. I think it was because I was trying to get as far away from this guy as I could. Luckily for me, I was pretty small and flexible back then, and going over to the other seat like that was fairly easy. But as I was crossing over, I felt a hand on my back, which was from the guy in the back seat. He didn't say anything, or at least I don't remember him saying anything. I was just desperate to get away from him. When I had made it across to the other seat, I opened up the door and ran outside. I sprinted across the parking lot and into the Carl's Jr. restaurant. When I made it inside, I looked around for my mom, who was standing on the side waiting for the order. I ran to her and told her that some guy had gotten into the car. She went out to the parking lot and I followed her. By the time we had gotten back to the car, the guy was gone, but the back door was wide open. I have no idea where the man went. Looking back at that experience though, I wonder what he was trying to do. More than likely, I think he was going to try to abduct me. I believe he was inside the restaurant looking outside, and when he saw my mom leave me in the car, he left. That gives me the chills to think about. This is one of the most bizarre things to ever happen to me. I live out west, and there are Carl's Jr.'s all over the place near my house. It's become a popular stop for me to get food late at night, and I also think that they have a great breakfast. One night, about 6 months ago, I worked a little bit late, and I felt lazy, so I pulled into the Carl's Jr. drive-thru on my way home. When I got there, nobody else was in the drive-thru, and I drove right up to the speaker. I remember that shortly after stopping, I noticed a car pulling up right behind me though. As I was ordering at the intercom, the car behind me started honking. I was perplexed. I hadn't been ordering for a long time or anything. I hadn't even been at the intercom for more than 30 seconds. When I placed my order, I drove up and the car drove behind me. I don't even think that they had ordered. I went to the next window and was there for a while longer waiting. The car honked at me once again. I looked back to him, but it was night and I couldn't tell who was driving the car. There was a space for them to drive around me if they wanted to leave or something, but they didn't. Within a couple of minutes, I had paid and got my order, and then I left. I was glad to get away from there with that weirdo honking at me. I drove home, which took maybe 10 more minutes total. When I got back, I pulled into the driveway and was really hungry and tired from work. As I got out of my car, I saw another car driving right up to the front of my house onto the street. The car then honked several times loudly and then sped away. It must have been the same car that was behind me in the Carl's Jr. drive-thru. I wasn't sure why they would have followed me home though. I was just glad that they had left. I went inside and finally got to eat. I was able to relax for a few hours before realizing that I had meant to go shopping that night on my way home from work. I had run out of many things, most of them foods, but some other things like toothpaste and toilet paper. The late workday must have caused me to forget. I thought about just going the next day, but there was a store right down the street like 2 or 3 minutes away, and it was only 9 p.m., so I decided to go. I went to the local supermarket and was there for probably about 10 minutes. When I was there, I was pretty quick to get all the basic stuff that I needed. After that, I drove back home and returned. When I got back, I parked my car in the driveway and began walking up to my front door. When I reached the front step, I realized something. The window next to the front door was broken. It was sort of tough to see because it was mostly covered by a bush, but I saw it. I knew that it hadn't been like that earlier when I had gotten home. Somebody had broken into my house and was probably still there. I turned around and ran back to my car. Once I was there, I called the police and waited inside my car for them. When they got there, they searched my entire house and property. Unfortunately, though, they never found anybody inside. Whoever had been there had left. When I finally got inside my house, nothing was missing. The only evidence was that broken window, and the back door was unlocked, indicating whoever broke in left that way. I never did find out who had been inside of my house, or who was honking in the car. Luckily, since then, nothing else strange has happened, but I have to think that the strange car that kept honking at me and the break-in were connected. This happened a few years ago. At the time, this was the summer after I graduated from high school. In the neighborhood that I lived in for most of my life, I remember that there was this one Hardees restaurant about 5 blocks from our house. It was rumored to be going out of business for what seemed like 10 years in a row. It was in a kind of odd location, and it never seemed to be that busy, but yet it was still there and still open. It was the summer, and one day I walked down to the park that was about a 15-minute walk from my house. I went there to go play some basketball, as it's one of my favorite hobbies. I went to that park all the time, and I don't remember exactly what time I got there, but I pretty much stayed until almost sunset. Then I began to walk home down the sidewalk. It was a Thursday, so that was the night that my parents went to their bowling league. That meant that I would be on my own for dinner, and as I walked past the old Hardees, I decided to go inside and see what they had. I hadn't been inside this Hardees in probably 10 years. When I got in, it looked quiet and kind of older. There was nobody else inside, but they were open, and I saw somebody behind the counter. I stood there looking at the menu for a moment, and then I ordered. As I was waiting there, somebody else entered the Hardees. It was a man, and he walked directly to the back of the restaurant and sat in one of the booths in the back. I continued to wait for my order for about 5 minutes or so. When I got it, I walked out to leave and noticed that the guy sitting in the booth got up. I walked back to the sidewalk to continue my way home, now with my Hardees bag. As I walked down the sidewalk, I heard the sound of somebody now walking a ways back behind me. It was the guy that I had seen inside the Hardees. He was a long ways back, but the more that I walked, the more that he continued to walk behind me. Soon, it was my street, and I walked down it to our house. When the guy left the sidewalk and went onto our street as well, I got kind of nervous. Who was this guy? When I reached the driveway and walked up, it sounded like the guy was now getting closer, and I looked behind me. He was on the street, and it now looked like he was starting to walk up my neighbor's driveway across the street. I felt much better seeing this, and I went inside. I sat down on the couch and had some Hardees while watching TV. It was really good. However, I would say 30 minutes later, as I sat on the couch, I happened to glance over to our front window, which overlooked the front yard. The guy was looking directly in. When I saw him, he ducked down. I ran over to the window to close the blinds, and I was suddenly sweating. After that, I ran around covering every window in our house that I could. Then I called my parents. Luckily, they were on their way home and only about 10 minutes away. I stayed on the phone with them until they came back, and when they did, they told me that they didn't see anybody in the front yard. I was relieved to hear this, and my dad and I went out and checked all around the house, and the man was gone. I wonder to this day, though, why he followed me home and what he wanted.